Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the state of modern web application security. My name is Dave Bittner, and I am the host of the CyberWire Daily podcast, and it is my pleasure to be the moderator of today's webinar. Today we are diving into one of the most critical and often overlooked front lines of cybersecurity. That's web applications. According to the latest Verizon DBIR report, web apps are still one of the top 3 ways attackers break into organizations. And with this year shaping up to be no different, now is the time to ask, why are these systems still so vulnerable, and what can we actually do about it? To answer those questions, joining us today are Laura Enríquez, Product Manager for Application Security at Outpost 24, and Mikhailo Stepa, Ethical Hacker with Outpost 24's Ghostlabs team, also Web Application Security Auditor. Together, they're going to unpack some of these real-world threats, persistent myths, and strategic moves your organization can make to stay ahead of the attackers. So, whether you're struggling with a budget, internal buy-in, or just want to know where to start, this episode is going to be packed with insights that can help you tighten up your AppSec game. So let's get into it. Before we dig into some of the specifics, just as a matter of introduction here, I'm going to ask each of you to just give us a brief introduction of your career paths, what led you to where you are today with Outpost 24. Laura, why don't I start with you?
Yeah, sure. So actually, back at university, I studied translation and interpreting, and I ended up in cybersecurity. How that happened is that I started in a very technical role in the translation world. I started coding. I got a scholarship to study web development, and I started working as a developer back in cybersecurity. And from there, I just started working as a PM after.
Very interesting. Michaela, how about you?
Yeah, for me, it was a bit different. I started as getting my degree in computer science. Coding was never my thing. I always like to break other people's code. From there, that led me to a introduction to cybersecurity with ethical hacking, mainly focused on social engineering. Later, I got into cybersecurity audits, which was paperwork. And then I found a great spot at Outpost, which gave me the opportunity to do what I love to do, is actual hands-on penetration testing. So that was my career path.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you both for taking the time for us here today and sharing your insights and your expertise. Laura, let's start off here and dig in kind of at a high level. As I mentioned in the introduction, web applications are still amongst the top 3 most prominent targets for cyber criminals. Why do you think that's the case?
So, I mean, that is not surprising at all. And I would go as far as to say that they're not just an important attack vector right now, they are the most prevalent. I am quoting Verizon here, but actually, one of the reports they show that they have seen a 180% increase in exploitation in web applications in just the latest year. So those are very frightening numbers. As to why we think that is happening, I mean, I think that the obvious answer is that applications, they're everywhere. You can think of them as the first point of contact with your customers. They will store your sensitive data, and they're constantly evolving. So when you put all of that together, it makes them really, really attractive to attackers. And also, one thing that we need to take into account with web applications is that they are exposed by design. So unlike any internal system, web applications, they are meant to be accessed from the outside, whether that's by customers, by partners, by literally anyone. So if there's a vulnerability in your web application, it's out there for anyone to find. You might have very strong security inside your network, but if your public-facing applications have gaps, attackers, they don't need to go through the rest. They can just go straight in from your web application. And if we take into account also the fast pace of development today, sometimes security is having a really hard time keeping up with that.
Well, why do you think that is? I mean, when we're looking at the trend lines here, and in terms of changing over the next few years? I mean, do you see this increasing or decreasing or staying about the same? What direction does it seem like we're headed here?
I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. Again, if we have a look at the data from Verizon, 100%, 180% increase in just the latest year. I don't think that that's going to change. If anything, I do think that the importance will continue to grow. We need to think about how much we rely on web applications. We use them for absolutely everything, and that will continue to happen. We use them for banking, for healthcare, for retail, and even for internal business tools. Everything is run on web applications right now. And they're not just customer facing either. More and more internal processes are depending on them as well. So unless something drastically changes in how the businesses are operating, attackers, they will continue to go after them. At the end of the day, that's where the data is, that's where the access is, and that's what makes them so valuable. So no, I don't think that this is going to change anytime soon.
Well, what are some of the trends that you see impacting application security landscape right now? I mean, we can't have a webinar these days without mentioning AI, right?
Yes. So a couple of trends will come to mind. I'll start with AI since that's the one that you just mentioned. Of course, there's a rise with AI, and that's on both sides. So attackers, they're starting to use AI to automate some of the processes, like, for example, launching phishing campaigns. But on the other side, as defenders, we're also using it to improve the detection, to improve the analysis, to improve efficiency, or just even sometimes to simplify tasks like authentication scripting. But again, I think that AI is just one of them. If we have to talk about some of the trends, one of the ones that I mentioned early is the speed of software development. So if we talk about CI/CD, DevOps, agile development that everyone loves to talk about, all of it means that there's less time to test everything properly. That is putting a lot of pressure on security teams to automate and to shift left. So to try to test as soon as possible in the development cycle. And to try to integrate as much as possible as well. Another trend that we are seeing is that we see that customers are now trying to move towards more flexible and on-demand security services for pen testing, for example. As I said, development cycles are getting a lot shorter. So organizations are now trying to look for ways to fit security testing into that fast rhythm. That's why we're seeing a surge in models like pen test as a service. It's gaining a lot of traction because it shows you that there's a shift away from those fixed, slow processes to something that is a lot faster and a lot more collaborative as well, both from the vendor with the final customer, but also in between your teammates. With pen test as a service, you don't have to plan a pen test 2 months in advance, so you're able to adapt a lot faster to those development cycles. You can launch it whenever you need it. You can get those results in a platform while the test is still ongoing. And you can stay agile without compromising that there. So, it's going to save you a lot of time at the end. And I think that finally, if I had to say something else, I would talk about the complex of web applications again. We cannot just think about the UI anymore or just like a simple web application. Web applications, they're using APIs, they're using microservices, they're using third-party components, and all of that, what it's doing, it is increasing your attack surface. You are no longer just securing your own code that you write, but you have to secure the ecosystem around it. That's also why there has been a growing focus on EASM, on external attack surface management. It's not just about keeping track of what you have anymore or what you think you have, because I can assure you that nobody will be able to tell you without EASM that they are 100% sure of what they have and what they own. Now it's all about trying to continuously discover what you have exposed, what might have changed. I don't know, those marketing websites that can pop up for a campaign, then everybody forgets to, to shut down. They're still out there. You maybe have forgotten about them, but they are still out there. That visibility is now essential for customers, and we are seeing more and more teams bringing EASM into their application security programs nowadays.
So, Laura, in the work that you're doing, I'm curious, are there any common misconceptions that people tend to have when it comes to application security?
Yes. So I think that for me, the biggest one that I see is that sometimes people try to treat application security as a one-time thing. So that you can just scan once, fix some stuff, and then you're good to go. You don't need to worry anymore about it. But again, fast development, applications are constantly changing, and so are the threats as well. So especially with how fast development is moving nowadays and how complex applications have become, you just cannot afford to treat security as a checkbox anymore. You need to keep up with the new deployments. You need to keep up with evolving code, with shifting infrastructure, and again, that expanding attack surface. Otherwise, you will just continue to play catch up. I think that the second big mistake that I see that is not so so obvious for everyone is treating all of the applications the same. Not every application needs the same level of testing or the same type of tooling. You need to really assess the risk per web application. You need to ask yourself questions like, what data does this application handle? How exposed is it? How critical is it to the business? Some applications, they might need continuous scanning. Some of them might need more regular manual pen tests, and some others might just need lightweight checks. In this, it's always about trying to use your resources where they will have the most impact, not just doing the same thing across the board.
So, Michaela, let me shift to you here. And suppose I am a threat actor and I'm looking around, I'm trying to find some easy pickings here. Are there any immediate giveaways for me to tell me that a web application is particularly vulnerable, that this is the one that I should go after?
Yes, definitely. There are definitely signs attackers look for right away. And this can be things like exposed error messages in the application when providing some random value in an input field drops you an error message that shows you internal file paths or directory paths that if you further find a local file inclusion vulnerability, you'll already have more insight into what the server is hiding and might have. It could be outdated software versions, which you can look up CVEs for and automatically find exploits for. It could be pages that return just too much technical information. Again, software versions or the database that the application is using. Even something like a login page with no account lockout or rate limiting is a clue that basic protections might have been missed. So if you can just run brute forces on an email that you found that's related to the application, some internal Microsoft email, you can start running a brute force attack. If attackers see this kind of thing, it tells them that the application likely hasn't been hardened and they'll spend more time probing it, for sure.
What do you consider to be the most common attack vectors that threat actors are trying to exploit here?
Well, attackers tend to stick with what works, and what works hasn't changed all that much over the years. Things like SQL injections, cross-site scriptings, or broken authentication mechanisms are still very common entry points. A lot of the time, they look for something simple, like, again, a login form that can be brute forced or an input field that's not being sanitized or properly checked for the content that's trying to be sent to the server, and it gets sent to the server and evaluated by it, which could lead to some pretty big damage. Another vulnerability that continues to be very common is weak authentication. And one of my colleagues, Luba Andren, recently published an article on 6 common vulnerabilities, which authentication vulnerabilities, which we will link and definitely recommend, as it gives a lot of insight and real world, found in the wild examples of what we find in our day to day. And as Laura mentioned previously, more recent is APIs. They have become an extremely popular target because they're everywhere now. But many of them are built quickly without the same kind of scrutiny that old web applications have gotten, and that makes them especially tempting for attackers.
Well, who has the responsibility these days? I mean, in most organizations, who has the responsibility for mitigating these types of attempts?
Well, that's a very good question because that's not just a one person's job. I would say that the responsibility is shared. Developers play a huge role because they're building the system in the first place, but they often don't have the time or resources to keep up with every security detail. Security teams, like the one I'm part of, help catch what slips through, usually through audits or testing. But I think more and more we're seeing that security needs to be baked into the development process itself from the start, not just being something that gets patched on at the end. And companies also have a role in making sure that culture supports that. If deadlines are everything and no one's held accountable for cutting corners on security, vulnerabilities are going to slip through.
Yeah, I mean that's a interesting insight. I'm curious, back to you, Laura. I mean, aside from cyber criminals attempting breaches, what are some of the other challenges that folks are struggling with when it comes to application security? Some of the other things like there's never enough money or time or expertise or manpower. Can you touch on some of those other things that are related to the security itself?
Sure. It's a combination of all of them. It's a mix. I think that, as Michaela just mentioned, time is also a big one. The teams are usually overwhelmed, and AppSec can sometimes get squeezed in at the end of a development cycle, if at all, and then nobody has time to fix anything. Budget is another big one. It is improving in some places, but application security still doesn't always get the same investment as other areas. And there's also a people problem. There's a shortage of specialized talent. So companies, they either can find the right experts, or the ones that they have to stretch their existing teams thin. And again, these three: lack of time, limited budget, not enough people, they are very common. But as we just mentioned, one issue that cuts across everything is internal awareness. If the broader organization doesn't understand the importance of application security, it's really hard to make progress, because those security teams, they might be doing their best, but if no one else sees this a priority in the company, whether that's product, that's engineering, that's even legal or leadership, then things will fall through the cracks. Everyone should have security in mind, not just the people with security in their title. When you have that awareness across the teams, then security will become a part of how the company works, not just that checkbox at the end of a process.
So it's really important to have buy-in from the C-suite.
Yes. Exactly.
How about compliance? I mean, that's obviously a concern. Where does that connect to all of this?
So, again, sometimes you need to talk money, and you need to talk not just about, you need to avoid attack. Sometimes for leadership, that's not enough because they don't understand what the impact will be to the business. You need to tie your security goals to your business outcome. That sounds very obvious, but if you want real investment from leadership, they need to see how AppSec will support things like uptime, like customer trust, and of course, like compliance, which is also a big one.
Hmm. What about pen tests? I mean, are traditional penetration tests still effective for modern web apps?
So, I mean, penetration testing, it's still essential, but how it's delivered, that needs to match how development works today. So when we talk about traditional pen testing, we're talking about those, PDF with results delivered after an engagement, through an email, or um, pen test as a service. It will give you a platform where you will be able to access those results in real time. You will be able to communicate with the pen testers. You will be able to add comments to your findings, to transition those findings, and to keep track of the trend of your web application. It will give you the same deep manual testing, but with a lot faster kickoff times, and again, a lot better visibility while the test is happening, and quicker access to those results that you can act on before. Imagine that we have found a critical vulnerability. You don't want to wait until the end of those 2-3 weeks of the engagement to receive that report so you can remediate it there. You want to make sure that you can remediate it as soon as it's discovered. So that kind of speed and flexibility, it's really hard to get from traditional models. So again, with Pentest as a service, you're not sacrificing the quality. You're just getting a much, much more efficient and integrated experience, in my opinion.
What about the developers themselves? I mean, has their role changed in relation to application security, let's say, over the past few years?
Yes, definitely. As we have been saying now, it's really important to make sure that your security program starts at development, not after something has been shipped. Developers, I would say that they are right now in the front line, because security isn't just something that happens after the code is written. They play a huge role because they are the ones building the app. And if they don't think about security as they go, then you're going to be always reacting to issues after the fact. In my opinion, what really, really makes a difference is when developers understand the why behind secure coding and not just the what. And this is not about turning them into security experts. They don't need to be, but it's about giving them the right context, the right tools, and making sure also, this is a big one, that they have the time and support to build the things securely from the start. I am a product manager, for example, and I have to make sure that in my sprint, I plan accordingly. They have time. If we are doing tests, they have time to fix any vulnerabilities. If we find any, if they need more time because they need to code securely, we need to make sure that they also have that time so they are not rushed. Michaela just mentioned about those APIs being built really, really fast and being plagued with vulnerabilities. We have to make sure that they also have the time to build securely.
Michaela, when it comes to optimizing the amount of time and the amount of effort spent on the identification and prioritization of these vulnerabilities, any thoughts on that in terms of the actual cybersecurity experts, how they can best make use of their time, maybe even reduce the effort when it comes to these sorts of things?
Yeah, definitely. I think to efficiently identify and prioritize vulnerabilities, combining automated and manual testing approaches is essential. Automated tools offer us speed and broad coverage, enabling regular scans to detect known vulnerabilities that show up every single day, the CVEs, for example, across extensive systems. However, they miss complex issues such as broken access controls, which often require human insight to identify. Manual testing provides depth and context, allowing experts to uncover nuanced vulnerabilities that automated tools might simply overlook. This approach is particularly effective in identifying logic flaws within the applications and other intricate security issues. By integrating both methods, organizations can leverage the strength of each: automation for efficiency and consistency, and manual testing for thoroughness and contextual understanding of the applications. This balanced strategy enhances the accuracy of vulnerability assessments and ensures a more robust security posture in the end. And we will also link a very nice article that was written a few months ago by a web application security expert, also at Outpost, Jimmy Berkowitz. He specifically wrote an article saying which vulnerabilities an AI or a scanner will never be able to identify, and why manual testing is still required in which cases.
Laura, let me switch back to you here. I mean, when you think about a company who decides that they are ready to jump in here, that they really want to take their AppSec program seriously, where should they begin? What do you recommend that would be the first thing that they take on a strategic layer?
So strategically, I would say that the first step is ownership. We have said over and over again that it's very important that everyone in the company is aware of the importance of application security. And while that's true, you still need to define who owns it. Because if it's everyone's job, it will often become no one's. And there are many different ways, how companies can do this, depending on the size, depending on how your teams are distributed. Maybe you can have a security champion in each of the development teams, or maybe you can have a central AppSec lead, but you need to make it someone's responsibility.
And what about on an operative layer?
I would say try to start small, start visible. Don't aim for perfect coverage on day one, because you're going to get overwhelmed, and then it's never going to get done because you're not going to see the results that you expect. Try to first understand the criticality of all of your apps. If you're not sure about your attack surface management, reach out to an EASM company. Make sure that you are aware of how your attack surface looks like. Understand the criticality of your apps. Pick up first the most critical apps, try to scan them regularly, schedule a pen test, and start fixing what matters. You need to start building that confidence, that momentum, and then you need to expand. But if you try, to fix everything and to have perfect coverage on day one, it's not going to work.
All right. Well, I think we've got some questions coming in from our audience here. So why don't we jump into some of those in the time that we have left together? We have a question from a listener who says, what advice would you give to smaller organizations dealing with limited budgets or staff when it comes to application security? Laura, you want to start off on that one?
Sure. Again, I'm going to sound like a broken record with visibility, but you need to start with visibility. You cannot secure what you don't know you have. You need to map your applications. You need to understand what's exposed, and you need to start prioritizing based on risk and business impact. You don't need to test everything all the time. Start with your most critical apps and grow from there. And also, I would say very important, don't try to build everything yourself. Look for solutions that can give you access to expert help when you need it if you don't have the resources. So you don't need to have a huge internal team. Those flexible testing models like Pentest as a service, or even going for managed services, they can help you scale your efforts without having to scale your headcount too much.
Michaelo, any insights there from you?
I was trying to find the unmute button. No, I wouldn't say that I have any input here. I think Laura covered it up pretty well.
All right, terrific. Well, let's move on to another question here. We have a question from another one of our participants out in the webinar. This is just sort of a I guess a question about the company itself. Is Outpost a web application software solution or a security company? Who wants to provide that clarification?
I can. It's a security company. We don't just provide application security. So we have our AppSec portfolio where we do both Pentest as a service. We also do DAST. We also have NetSec. We have EASM. We have threat intelligence and DRP. You're, of course, welcome to have a look at our website and to have a look at our solutions. We also very recently launched something that's called Cyberflex, which is a combination of EASM and application security. Again, we have seen a race of customers asking to provide them with something like that, where we basically help you not just discover all of your web applications, but what we are aiming here is to be an extension of your own company. So we are the security experts. We can help you build your AppSec strategy. We can help you discover your web applications, understand the criticality of them. We can help you come up with a budget, and we can help you come up with a plan for the whole year about testing. But as I said, it's not just, we don't just do web application. We do all sort of pen testing, web application, EASM. It's a cybersecurity company.
All right, terrific. And just for the folks who are out there in our audience, just a quick reminder that we do have attachments and links as part of the webinar platform here today. I think if you look at the little paperclip icon there, that'll get you what you need. Let's go to another question here. It says, how can we adapt our strategy in response to increasingly sophisticated web-based attacks?
I can take that one.
All right.
Okay. So again, broken record, but visibility, adaptability, and prioritization. You need to know what you have exposed, understand which assets are most at risk, and you need to make sure that your security approach is able to evolve alongside your web applications. This means that you need to combine continuous testing with external attack surface monitoring. What we just said about Cyberflex, about our customers asking us for this. And you cannot just rely in a one-size-fits-all solution. What works for one web application might not work for another. So you need to align your testing approach with the business criticality. Sophisticated attacks, they don't always mean that you need to have sophisticated defenses. It means that you need to be smart, and you need to be informed about what you own.
Well, related to visibility, one of our viewers asks, what would be step one to finding visibility?
Again, as I said before, I am sure that even if I ask you, are you 100% sure of what you own and what you have exposed, and you tell me yes, I can assure you that if you reach out to us and we run an ESM for you, we will discover things that you didn't know you had exposed. So even if you think that you are sure of what you own, start with external attack surface management. You really need to know what you have. Different companies, they operate in very different ways, and you maybe think that you have a really good inventory of what you have developed. But as I said before, imagine those marketing websites that pop up about a campaign. Have they really, have they forgotten about that? Is it out there? What data does it have? Does it have vulnerabilities? When was the last time that you tested it? So I think that for a really, really strong AppSec strategy, the smartest decision would be to combine ESM and Pentest as a service.
So it's fair to say a lot of folks out there are stuck in that position where they don't know what they don't know, right?
Yeah, and when it depends, in the company, this is always like the broken form. You go ask, but did you forget about this? Is it still out there? Do you remember this website? Do you? People don't remember. And again, when you're developing so fast, it's really easy to forget that you have exposed web applications out there. So you need a tool that will help you discover them.
I see. So another question from the audience, someone writes and says, since we're talking about web applications, zero trust methodology, will it be applicable? What about zero trust in all this?
Gil, can you maybe take that one?
Yeah, sure. Definitely zero trust is not just about networks. It applies as much to web applications. The core idea of zero trust is to never trust, always verify. And that fits perfectly with how modern web applications work, especially when you think about APIs. microservices and cloud deployments. But for web apps, that would mean treating every request as potentially untrusted, even if it comes from inside your network or a known user, applying strict authentication or authorization checks at every layer, not just the login page, which is also, I think, one of the best practices, which is suggested. Segmentation of applications and services. So one part is compromised, the damage is contained, and monitoring and logging everything to spot unusual behavior quickly. I would say that yes, it is very applicable. Definitely.
All right, very good. Another question. Someone says, I also see that many web applications are built with focus on functionality and sometimes neglect to involve experienced security teams that can evaluate their web application. But with today's AI, can this be resolved up to a certain point? Of course, AI. What part does it have to play?
I mean, AI can help you in some parts, like it can help you automate some parts, like the review, but it will never replace experienced security teams. Well, maybe not never, but right now it is definitely not at that stage. Especially if we're talking about complex or business-specific logic. It can be helpful, but it's not a full solution. Again, anything, as we mentioned, you can go and check our blog post where we talk about how automated tools, there's certain vulnerabilities that they will not be able to find. I think that we can talk about AI here as well. It's not going to replace a pen tester.
Help me understand here. What is the best way to go about balancing speed of deployment with security when you're in an agile development environment? How do you dial that in?
So you can, of course, do a combination of both. We mentioned before a dash scanner. That is something that you can integrate into your CI/CD. So you can have, those scans whenever you are deploying new code, but you should still be testing your web application. Also here, the importance is to try to test as early in the development process as possible. This is also possible with pen testing. I think that also a lot of people think that you can only pen test your web application once it's out in production. If you have a development environment and it's not been launched, you cannot test it. You can definitely test that. And again, if we're talking about pen test as a service versus traditional pen testing, whenever you have that need, whenever you're not sure about the quality of your web application, it's going to be very easy for you to kick off a pen test, and it's just going to start a lot sooner.
All right. Another question from one of our viewers. They ask, is AI integration into a web app a pretty big vulnerability? They say, my company is looking into doing this as of right now, looking to make sure that we do this integration right. What do you think?
Michaela, maybe this one's a bit more technical for you.
Yeah, it also matters into how it's being integrated, whether it's just being like OpenAI is taking care of all the requests, or if it's a local instance, because that has to do with the scoping of it, I guess. But if it's a local instance, then it very much depends on how the AI model is trained and on what data and what its restrictions are, how well it's hardened.
I mean, my sense, Michaela, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is that introducing an AI component sort of by its nature introduces a certain amount of uncertainty.
Yes, definitely prompt injection and whatever, however you can bypass the AI to do what you want is obviously it's a difficult question. But if it's something that's being integrated from a third party, then in most of the tests that I've encountered, it is considered to be out of scope since the customer is not responsible directly for the product that they're integrating. You would have to take it up with the vendor.
Interesting.
So that very much depends on the way you integrate it.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess it's still kind of early days, right?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of that, let's sort of piggyback on that. When we're talking about not necessarily AI, but just automation, machine learning, what sort of parts do they have to play when it comes to modern web app defense?
So again, automation, I would say that right now it is essential to keep up with the pace of development. Using a scanner, using your CI/CD to make sure that you're continuously testing. You cannot manually test everything all the time. So automating basic checks and integrating them into your pipelines, it will give you a baseline level of coverage, but you still need to be pen testing your web applications throughout the year. I would say the machine learning is still kind of emerging in the space. It's already helping streamline some of the parts of the process, like creating those authentication scripts, for example. But again, it's just not replacing human testers. However, it is making them a lot more efficient because you can always use it to try to reduce those repetitive tasks, so they can focus on what really matters on their day-to-day.
Michaela, I'm curious, from your perspective and your experience, what kind of security mistakes do you see developers most commonly making when it comes to their production code? Are there things that you see over and over again?
You wouldn't believe some of the things that I see day
We've
to
got a
day.
few. We've got a few minutes.
Yeah, it can be anything, honestly. It could be just trying to obfuscate the path to an administrative panel, for example, for the application. Default credentials that aren't being updated, which is an extreme malpractice, complete negligence. So just using admin gives you full access to the internal workings and setting up of the site. And this is true for WordPress applications and very internal systems. Very weak policies like password policies allowing users to set up credentials that are one character long, or mistaking a password that's all capital letters or all lowercase letters to be the same thing. It could be also something like screwing up the authentication mechanisms for generating JVTs, which basically authorize you to issue API requests. It's such a vast amount of different vulnerabilities you encounter. Sometimes it's just plainly changing a value of is admin true in the browser inspector tool for the session handling, and that the application starts thinking that you're the administrator and everything's fine. There's just a lot of, I would say that the number one issue is probably people being very sloppy, and that's, like Laura said, possibly due to very tight time constraints. And just get it out the door, push
Right.
it. It has to be online tomorrow. We'll fix it. If something breaks, we'll fix it on the go. And that's not the approach that you should take when you're handling very sensitive information, especially if it's your customer's private information, like documents or whatever it might be, healthcare information.
Well, I mean, Laura, to that point, I think what Michaela was describing is a methodology that puts people in a reactive state, right? They're responding to things. We'll fix it tomorrow. We'll cover those mistakes as they come when we find out that things are broken. What advice do you have for developers to become more proactive in preventing these vulnerabilities, to try to get more ahead of the game?
So, I mean, there's of course always training. There are a lot of companies out there who specialize in security training for developers. This is a really, really good start because it will already provide you with like a structured program so you can learn the basics. And again, it's not, they don't need to become experts. They just need to know what they need to take into account when they are developing. Also, if you have a security team in your company, don't be afraid to reach out to them. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable and tell them, hey, I don't know anything about security. Can you please, do a training? Can you help me out? Can you let me know like the top 5 things that I should take into account when I'm developing? I think that that's always the first step. If you already have experts in-house, make sure that you're talking to them. Make sure that you are all in line and that they are teaching you. And if not, you can always talk to your company and see if you can have access to the developer security training that we just talked about.
We've got a viewer asking about passkeys. Will passkeys resolve many of the traditional password issues? And should the security community push harder on having all web application providers support it? So that's an interesting question. To what degree are passkeys the future? Michaela, do you have thoughts on that?
Passkeys referring to password managers, I assume.
Well, passkeys, not necessarily password managers themselves, but passkeys being the technology where the security key is sort of stored on site. It takes away some of the friction. Laura, are you familiar with what we're talking about here?
No.
Okay. All right, that's fine. We will move on to a different question here. Someone writes in and says we have an in-house ERP system through a web app, and it ends up getting worked on live. Is there anything I can do to advise my devs to keep in mind when live testing happens? They do have a fix, or he says they have a fix on the go mentality. So this touches on what we were talking about, it being proactive or reactive. So kind of Laura, getting in front of this fix on the go mentality.
Yeah. So, I mean, from my side, from product, I would say try to remind them that even those, during those live fixes, security matters, especially, in those instances where you're handling sensitive data. I don't know, for recommendations, maybe Michaela can go into a little bit more technical about what they should have into account. Like, of course, the basics of, I don't know, not having hard-coded credentials, avoid exposing debug endpoints, try to log what has changed. So there's always a track about everything. And also try to move toward testing and staging when possible. It's, of course, a lot safer to do that before it's out in production, and you will save a lot of time in the long run.
Michaela, do you have a certain amount of sympathy or empathy for that fix on the go mentality? I mean, you understand how people get in that mindset?
I do get how they get into that mindset. And I mean, with this question, the thing that scares me is fixing it on a production environment, because testing on production is never really recommended, because you never know what you might find, especially when you have access to the application just to check simple authorization issues. There might be some people that start a scan having internal access that launches some exploit that brings down the whole environment, and you don't really have a point of recovery. So I'm not sure about, always seeing a live environment kind of gives me the creeps when I try to go in testing.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's understandable. And yet at the same time, like we say, there's a certain amount of I guess sympathy or empathy. You can understand how people find themselves in that situation, I suppose.
Yeah, sure. I
For
mean,
better or
when
for worse.
yeah, I would say empathy more, because I
Yeah.
feel like they're under pressure from management most likely.
Yeah.
And you don't want to lose your job. You don't want to have a serious discussion, so you just get it over with.
Yeah. Fair
But
enough.
it mostly comes back to bite you in the
Right.
end. And if
Well,
it does, it hurts.
for sure. Well, in the time we have left, I'm going to ask each of you, where do you suppose we're headed here? I mean, when you look at emerging technologies, when you look at the future of web application security, where do you suppose we're headed here? Laura, why don't I start with you here?
So I am seeing a lot of API testing right now. As we mentioned before, right now APIs are the foundation, because with one single API, you might be able to test several web application backends and even mobile apps. So we're seeing a huge surge in pen testing for APIs and also automatic scanning for APIs as well.
All right. And Michaelo?
Yeah, I think that with AI entering the picture, my job is a lot of people are scared that manual testing is not going to be viable anymore because AI can do everything. But I see it as a very big plus because from my side, it just optimizes my workflow. I get to skip the boring stuff and get to the actual interesting chaining of exploits that you might find on applications. APIs, like Laura said, I think are going to be most prevalent in the future. They're not going anywhere. So, yeah.
Well, speaking of APIs, we have a question from one of our viewers here asking about APIs, asking why aren't APIs tested more thoroughly? For example, using an actual API scanner to find vulnerabilities instead of using a web app scanner. What should we make of this? Is API testing coming up short for us? Michaelo, do you have thoughts there?
API scanning. Well, not really sure what this question means. Laura?
Yeah, so I think that what the question means is that why customers are not just using an API scanner instead of a DAST. I think that you cannot generalize on this. It depends on the web application. It depends on the API. We have seen APIs. In order for you to test your API, especially with an automated tool, you need to have a really, really well-documented API schema. If you don't have that, you will not be able to test it with any automated tool. And we have seen that with a lot of companies. They don't know the endpoints that they have. It's not documented, so it's not going to work. But it depends on the web application. It depends on the API. It's just in cybersecurity, I don't think that you can say anything generally, because it will depend on what type of web application and API at the end. But yeah, we're seeing a surge, and we're definitely seeing more and more customers requesting API testing.
All right, terrific. Well, I think with that, this is a good opportunity for us to wrap things up and wind down today's webinar. My thanks to Laura Enríquez and Michaelo Stepa from Outpost 24 for breaking down the ever-evolving world of web application security, from the top threats targeting web apps today to practical strategies your team can use tomorrow. I think it's clear that staying ahead isn't just about patching holes. If there's one takeaway, don't wait for perfect. Start where you are. Even small improvements can make a big difference in your AppSec posture. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And if you found this webinar helpful, please share it with your colleagues. My understanding is it will be available for viewing after the fact. And help other people find our show. As always, stay safe out there, stay curious. On behalf of everybody at Outpost 24, I'm Dave Bittner from the Cyberwire, and our thanks to all of you for joining us here today. We hope to see you back here next time. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.